Hi, it's Nicola Bird here with the Little Peace of Mind podcast, bringing you a completely fresh, new understanding to help you find freedom from panic attacks, anxiety and stress, and experience peace of mind from the inside out. In today's podcast episode, you're going to hear me interview Vivienne Edgecombe. Vivienne I interviewed before the publication of her book, Already Complete, came out. But after the interview, I was so intrigued by what she had to say, I asked her to send me a copy of the book, which she did. That book is now published, and I'll put a link to it under the show notes in the podcast. But the talk with Vivienne and the book impacted me profoundly. Now, I wasn't expecting that. I created this podcast with Vivienne about childlessness. It's not something I have an experience of. And so I was kind of interviewing her because I was curious about her story. And as so often happens with my guests, when I wasn't really listening to hear what's in this for me, I heard something huge. For me, I suddenly realized there's a huge area of my life where I don't feel complete, where it feels to me that if only this situation was a different way, then I'd be happy. And I hadn't realized that until I heard Vivienne speak. And a beautiful thing happened. Like, as I heard her speak, as I read her book, it was like a gap that had been opened up, closed for me. And I felt a sense of completeness that I hadn't had before. So I just wanted to share that with you. So if you're listening to this podcast and childlessness isn't something that's part of your experience, please listen anyway, because you're going to hear something beautiful in this podcast that I think is relevant for every single human being. Enjoy. So today I have my guest is Vivienne Edgecombe. Welcome to the podcast, Vivienne.
Thank you very much, Nicola. It's a pleasure to be here.
Vivienne reached out to me when I was looking for guests for this podcast, and she had a really fascinating and unique story that I haven't had an opportunity to share before on this podcast. So I said yes, straight away, booked her in. And here we are. So I wanted, without ruining it for you, because I'd love her to tell it in her words, I'm just going to open up to you, Vivienne, and just ask you to share a little bit about, well, what you shared with me on the message, really. A little bit about your story, and then I'm sure I will jump in and ask questions. But let's just start with, like, why did you reach out? What is your story?
What is my story? Well, I reached out because I felt like there was something that needed to be told about childlessness and people's ability to be happy and fulfilled without having children. Because, and I guess this is my story, when I was in my early 30s, it became clear that I wasn't going to be having children. And that was unexpected for me. I'd always, like so many women, just expected that I would have kids. It was kind of, I took it for granted.
Do you mind sharing how you came to be in that situation? Was it a biological thing or a lifestyle thing or a choice?
It didn't feel like a choice, that was for sure. It was a combination of life circumstances and biological factors. So I very much felt like my choices had been taken away from me. And that kind of threw me into a several year cycle of turmoil, basically. Right. I call it my tumble dryer phase, because I felt like I was going round and round and round and just couldn't get out. And I had, I bored myself to tears. I was, trying to make sense of this, trying to rationalize or come to some kind of peace about this situation that I found myself in. And so I would talk to people and try to get clear, try to get peace, try to feel like I had my life, like I was steering my own life rather than it being steered for me, if you like. And but everywhere I turned, and it's still the same today, the message that we're given is that we can't be happy or fulfilled completely. You might be able to cope, or you might be able to manage, or you might be able to have an okay life.
Yeah.
But if you wanted children and you couldn't have them, sorry, you're destined to be a bit sad or a bit, grieving for the rest of your life. And that felt, not great, as you can imagine. And I kind of felt, I do remember thinking, surely not, surely this is not my lot to have a second-rate life. It didn't feel like that could be true, but I couldn't see how it wasn't.
Yeah. Well, and I guess through that part of your journey, you were bumping into women who lived as if that was true. I guess if you're told that, if that's the kind of dominant belief in the culture, and you think that you're never going to be completely fulfilled, if that's what you think, that's what you're going to get, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was everywhere, and it still is everywhere. Movies that you watch and books that you read, even the ones where people are dealing with infertility, and you're looking at how they might have coped with it, and then in the end they have this, if it's a novel, this miracle happens and they get to have a baby after all.
Which is the thing they wanted after all, even though they thought they didn't.
Found that they were really at peace with it, but lo and behold, they had a baby anyway. And it's it doesn't always work out like that in the real world. So I was just looking, I was seeking, really. I was trying to find peace, and I found it to some extent when I was doing some energy therapy, and I just came to a realization that actually I had no idea what my future looked like. I was imagining this future and basically painting it grey, and then believing that would be my future. And actually I had no idea.
Just I hope you don't mind me asking, I'm curious, because this hasn't been my life experience. But during that period, up until you had this experience with this energy person, were you kind of just trying to find more and different and alternative ways, or persuading people in your life that a baby was a good idea? Was your head full of ideas and method and time spent still trying to have a baby, or was it more that was just not an option so quickly, and then you were just trying to come to peace with the fact that was never going to happen? Do you know what I mean? How did those years play out? I guess a mixture of both. I don't know.
Yeah, it was certainly a mixture of both. There was a period of time where I was sort of, I guess, still hoping, and still thinking that it might happen, but not. I don't think I really believed it. So that was turmoil in itself. And then when I got to the point of realizing actually this is not going to happen, and either I have to change my whole life. I would have had to leave my relationship, which I was incredibly happy in, and then all the unknowns of, well, even if I leave, who says I'm going to find somebody else, and that our pairing will be compatible for having children, and that I'd even want to have children with this person, and blah blah blah.
I was just wondering, because my guess is I've had friends who have gone through the cycle of not endless, but it feels like endless IVF and hormone injections, and it becomes completely and utterly all-consuming, and then the monthly disappointment where it hasn't happened, and just that whole kind of takes over your whole life for a while. That whole experience as well, which is just all-consuming.
I did absolutely feel consumed by it for a number of years. I felt like it was the only thing I thought about, the only thing I talked about. As I said, I felt like I was really boring for that period of time.
Yeah, well, we are. Whenever we get obsessed with whatever it is that, like when we're ruminating on a subject, when it consumes us completely, it's all we ever want to talk about.
Yeah.
With whoever will indulge us, and we turn it into, no, this is a real thing, whether it's we're talking about our children, our not having children, our upcoming wedding, our business, our dog, our horses, or whatever it is that we're obsessed about. It's like, you know what it is, because it's the thing that you could go around and see your friend for a cup of tea, or you could have an hour with a coach. It's the thing you'd really love to talk about for a whole hour.
Yeah.
And you always want to do it with people who think that it's a thing as well, because you know, you want people to buy into your whole, this is a problem, right? This is a really big important thing that's worthy of all this thought. It kind of justifies how we're spending our time, right?
I really can't remember anyone in that period of time not thinking it was a thing for me.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't have anyone who said to me, do you know what, you can just be happy. You can just have a fulfilled life anyway. You know what, you could just do that.
Yeah. I mean, like, I never have people, like, you know, my business and my work is my current obsession, but I never have people that, because the people I choose to go and talk to about that are people normally who are interested in business stuff as well. And I never have people go, do you know, it's not actually that big a deal. Like, nobody ever says that to me, right? Because you don't seek out those conversations, do you? You kind of look for validation, you know. And I have a lot of clients with anxiety, and they look, when they have a conversation with someone, they look for validation that what they are up against is real and true.
Yeah.
You know, we seek that out.
I do remember thinking, well, as I said, I remember thinking, surely this is not my lot. But the message that I kept getting was, sorry, this, you know, this really sucks. And
so go back to saying what the first kind of insight that you had when you were with your energy therapist.
So that really was that I didn't have a crystal ball and I couldn't see the future. And even if I knew, you know, even if there was one fact, which was I wasn't going to have children, everything else around that was made up. Everything else that I had been looking into the future and seeing as my future was entirely made up. I didn't have any idea what my future was going to look like.
Wow. How did you get that insight? That's a big insight. Like, if I was to say to you, like, you know, to see that, oh, the way I had painted the picture of my future isn't true. Like, that's huge, right? Because we all do it. Like, I imagine what it's going to be like when I, you know, work with this client, or what my diary is going to look like next week, or what I'm going to do in the holiday. Like, we constantly think we know how the future's going to look. How did you get that insight? Like, how do you account for that?
It just came, you know, as they do. It really just came. I was, you know, something, I guess, I just had a new thought. I was just going over and over all this bollocks that I was thinking. And I just had a new thought of, actually, I don't know that. I don't know that.
Can you remember what that felt like? Because those kind of insights, sometimes they just come with either like a wow, or just like a, yeah, that's so true, and I never saw it. Do you remember? Sometimes we remember our like first big insights like that.
Yeah, I remember feeling relief. I don't remember it being a huge lightning bolt thing.
Yeah.
But it certainly brought relief with it.
Yeah.
And a whole lot of stuff fell away. I don't think I realized the magnitude of what I was seeing even then. And I still at that point had some other thinking about, I think I still thought that I would need something, some sort of coping strategy to help me along the way. Something that would, you know, oh, well, if I get sad again at some point, then I'll need to figure something out. I'll need to manage it in some way, manage my grief, manage my sadness, whatever. And it wasn't till I started learning about the principles that kind of fell away, and I went, oh no, I don't know what, I mean, it was more of the same. I don't know what I'm going to feel. I don't know how things are going to pan out. And I know that I will have access to all the resources and all the new thinking and all the insight that I need when I need it, because that's how we're built.
That's very cool. And how did you bump into the principles? Like, how did it happen for you?
I think it was by stealth. I was doing NLP with Jamie Smart, and it was in 2009, and it was just the time when he was coming to the principles and going, actually, there's something here that's bigger than I thought. And so I was almost part of his guinea pig group. And so I was introduced to so many of the teachers at that point. It just, and again, it wasn't like lightning bolts or anything. I just felt so settled with it. I just thought, oh yeah, there it is. You know, this feels true to me. This is what I needed to hear right now.
Yeah. So what were some of the things that you heard through understanding the principles that were relevant to your situation? So what normally happens with these podcasts is there are some people that listen to every one because they just hear something new and fresh no matter what the topic. But there will be people who are listening to this podcast specifically because they're interested in hearing something new about childlessness. And so what was it that you heard? If you were going to share with people listening about this particular topic, like what have you heard through the principles that's helped you with this particular circumstance?
I think so many things. One of the biggest things, along with the I don't have a crystal ball piece, is that I'm already complete. There's nothing that I need to complete me or make me fulfilled or to give me happiness, because that's already me. I'm made of that, and that's, you know, when I really got that, it stops the search, really. It just means it's no longer relevant to keep looking for something outside of me to make me happy. And it also meant that I no longer had to be sad. Which was a huge relief. You know, that's huge for someone who thought that there would always be sadness about this. To know that actually that's not, that doesn't have to be true at all. And that was very different from anything that I'd ever heard, or certainly anything that I had ever understood before.
So if someone's listening and we had a guest a few weeks ago, and whenever she hears something like that, her response is, what? Then she goes like, could that be true? But like, if you've got people listening to this going, well, hang on a minute, what do you mean we're complete when I don't have a child? But like, hang on a minute, like back up, like say more about that. So could you say more about that for those people who are going, what?
Like, I haven't heard that before.
Yeah.
It's one of those kind of hard things to pin down, isn't it? But what I really, from a very logical perspective, I think, because I tend to think quite logically, which is to my detriment at times. But
Me too.
What I really saw was that, you know, when we're born, we're these little miracles of nature, and no one ever thinks, oh, you know, well, it'll be really great once you're complete, you know, once you've got what you need to be complete. And so I just looked at them and I thought, at what point did my completeness get removed from me? If I'm not already complete, who took that? At what point did it go anywhere? Because it seems to me it can't go anywhere. There's nothing that can be taken away from me that means that I'm no longer complete. So the only thing that had happened was that I started thinking I wasn't complete.
Right.
The only thing that stopped me from realizing that I was complete was the thought that I wasn't. Yeah,
and that's relevant as well. Yeah, no, and relevant to the same extent. The thought that comes to mind is, it's same if you're not in a relationship, right? If you're single, similar thing there, right? Like that our society kind of assumes that you're going to have a partner, you're going to be with somebody, and that there's a lack of completeness somehow that you'll always feel if you're not. And it's the same thing, I guess.
Anything that we think we need to complete us, it's absolutely the same thing.
So for people who haven't come across the principles before, so you started to see that, I started to think I wasn't complete, but for that thinking I was actually fine. So explain a little bit about that thought component of, well, I just thought I was complete, and then I realized that was the only thing that was making me feel incomplete. Like, talk a little bit about how that works as far as you see it.
Yeah. I think I remember very vividly lying in bed feeling quite happy and content, and then it was like a switch flicked, and I started thinking about, I'm not going to have children, this is miserable, my usual soundtrack to that lot of thinking. And I can remember almost seeing the result of that. I've just started thinking this, and suddenly, I was having a lovely time here, I was feeling happy and content, and now I'm on the verge of tears again, and feeling miserable and heartbroken and whatever. And so when I started learning the principles, and they started talking about the role of thought in our experience, and how every thought we have comes with a feeling, and our feelings follow perfectly our thinking, that just made so much sense to me, because I could see it all through my life, not only in this context, but that's what happens, right? I think this, and then I feel that, and so it goes. So once I started to see my thinking playing out, I could see that even when nothing had changed, I mean nothing did change. I wasn't having children, and yet I would be quite happy one minute and devastated the next, and happy again and devastated. So it wasn't, it just became clear to me, it's not the situation that's causing these fluctuations in my experience, it's actually my thinking. And when I think these sad thoughts that make me feel like I'm a victim of my circumstances, then that's what I get. And when I'm not having those thoughts, when I'm thinking, happy, pleasant, contented thoughts, that's what I get. It's it just became very visible to me.
So just asking the questions I know that some of the listeners will be asking. So, but it seems like this is what they would be saying, right? My guess is. So it seems to me that it's just when I remember that I don't have children that I get upset. And of course I would, because it's true. And then sometimes I forget because I'm distracted, I'm watching TV or something, but it doesn't take away the fact that I don't have children, and that's sad.
Yes.
And so when I remember it, I get upset, and who wouldn't? And then sometimes I forget about it because it's like I'm just busy doing something else. But it doesn't take away from the fact that whenever I think about it, I'm sad.
Yeah. And I've heard that many times, as if oh, well, you must be in denial then, or you're just positive thinking or whatever.
I know it's
and
not. I know it's different.
There's
How would you
something
explain
different.
that?
So what I'm saying is absolutely, there's a fact here. I don't have children. I'm not going to be having children. It's a bit late now anyway, let's be honest. And there'll be people listening to this who won't have children. And I always thought, and we are told, as we said at the beginning, that this is a sad or tragic circumstance, that the fact that you won't have children is sad, inherently sad.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I realized through learning about this, is that there is no circumstance, and I know this is a big leap for people, and it was a big leap for me until I just saw it, and then it wasn't a big leap anymore, but that the circumstance itself is not sad. The only sadness comes when we think sadly about it. Because there are, I'm not the 1 in 7.5 billion people, or however many there are on the planet, who was sad and now isn't sad. There's, or who wanted children and can't have them but is still happy and fulfilled. There are lots of women or lots of people who don't have children and are quite happy. There are lots of people who have children and aren't happy.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who don't have children and are very unhappy. There's the whole range of human experience, and it's not the circumstance that's doing it to us.
Yeah, and there'll be people listening who aren't in your circumstance, but they're up against, a dying parent or a health diagnosis, or have just lost their jobs, or are facing divorce, or life circumstances that we're continually told are upsetting, distressing, and cause us to feel a certain way. And actually, everything that Vivienne's saying here is as relevant for any of those things as well. So, a lot of my clients will say, well, I have a health diagnosis, or my partner has a health diagnosis. Of course I'm anxious, right? Or, I have to go and have an operation. Of course I'm anxious. Or I've just lost my job, or I can't go back to work because I'm too anxious. Of course that makes me really nervous and worry about money. And, it really, really, really looks to, who wouldn't be? And actually that's quite a good clue, isn't it? Whenever you hear yourself going, well, who wouldn't be in this situation? Actually, you can look around you and you can see that, as human beings, we have all kinds of emotions, and there's nothing we're pointing to here that says that you shouldn't be sad. Like you can be sad, happy, at peace, enjoy, no matter what your circumstances. And I know that's really shocking if you've got a lot on the no, but I want kids and I can't have them, or no, I don't have proper health and I never will have again. No, someone close to me has died. That's like, of course I'm sad. And it's like, we're not saying you shouldn't be. We're saying you don't. No. We're saying it's not obligatory.
Yes, and actually, it's okay to be as well.
Yeah.
But it really helps to understand what's behind it and what's actually causing it, rather than pinning it on your circumstances. Because if your circumstances aren't going to change, and you think that your happiness and well-being is attached to them, then it does feel like it's obligatory to be.
Well, I did a podcast with a lady called Susan a couple of weeks ago, and she has a progressive disease. So she knows, not only is she would like it if her circumstances weren't going to change, but she knows she's going to get iller every single year. And yet she lives in peace of mind and well-being a lot of the time, despite those circumstances. Despite the worst circumstances we can imagine, and it isn't a given that a circumstance it's like two separate tracks. There's like the events of life on one hand, and then our variable experience of those on the other. Like you said, like the fact that you're not going to have children hasn't changed, and yet you go up and down about that all the time, depending on what state of mind you're in, even though the facts don't change.
Yeah. Although, I guess, I mean, it's been a while now since I had these insights, so I don't really, it doesn't really enter my frame of reference anymore. It doesn't feel like that.
Now you're just Vivienne living her life rather than being defined by this thing that was an all-consuming thing. So you have had these couple of big insights early on when you were working with Jamie, and then like how has your life shifted and changed now? Like what is it? Just coming? Is it just acceptance? Is it just coming to terms with it? Is it just like, oh my goodness, I could just create a whole amazing life the same as anybody else?
Well, yeah, it was more that. It really was more that. Oh, wow. Okay. So actually I could, given that I have no idea what my future is going to be like, what would I like to do? What would be fun? So, I mean, one of the first things was, and this was even before I'd come over to the UK from New Zealand, I'd always wanted to come and live in France. And so once I realized that I really wasn't going to have children and I didn't know what my future was going to be like, I thought, right, well, I'll go and live in France then. And I put stuff in place to start that, start getting that ball rolling. And I now live in France and it's lovely. And I could never have predicted this life. I could never have seen myself living halfway up a mountain in the Pyrenees, with 5 chickens and a dog and my husband and a cat, and and it's lovely. And I'm so grateful for my life. I just think, wow.
It strikes me that we kind of would be so easy to slip into living a life of lack, like a life defined by what we don't have, and our choices defined by what we don't have, whether that's children, money, husband, whatever. And I know, because I'm the worst for, when I'm go off and I'm not thinking straight, I have not enough written on my eyeballs, as my mentors lovingly point out to me. And I walk around and I see lack everywhere. So I can see lack of clients. I can see lack of good behavior in my children. I can see lack of enough dishes being done by my husband. I can see lack of like exercise in my own life. I can see lack of everywhere if I look for it. When it's on my eyeballs, when I've got that state of mind on, like I see it everywhere, and it will look like, and then the decisions that I make are based out of that feeling of lack. So if it looks to me, oh, I don't have enough clients, then I'll go and do some stuff to get more clients. If it looks like my kids there's a lack of good behavior, then we might end up sitting down and doing we need to have a chat about this conversation, right? Same goes with my husband, which never goes very well. But it's like everything, like everything in our lives, then from that place we're coming from a feeling of judgment and lack, and that we don't have enough and that we are not enough. And because essentially when we're living in that feeling of lack, that's what we're seeing, that we are not enough. Because we are like projectors, right? So if we think we are not enough, then we look out in the world and we see that the world is not enough, including ourselves. And I could see how easy it would be to live in that feeling. For all the years I had anxiety, I lived in that feeling the whole time. I felt like if I could just grow my business more, if I could just get the next promotion, if I could just get the next pay rise, if I could just, because where I wasn't good enough. And so I was driven out of that fear and insecurity and lack to make decisions and choices, and that was my come from until I discovered the principles. And then as I've settled down more, I've seen that actually not enough. It's just a state of mind, and it's one I'm liable to lapse into quite easily. So if I know that, then when I fall into it, it doesn't matter that I fall into it. It's that I know that that's what I've fallen into. And so I don't take myself so seriously, but it's no longer the power I run off anymore. It's not my come from. Okay? My come from is kind of seeing what you saw, that there's just abundance and, you know, plenty of enough, that we have everything we need, that we're complete, that we are mind. Like, what more is there? And then when we look around the world from that place, we see mind in our clients, we see mind in our kids, we see mind in our husbands, we see mind in, you know, in beauty in nature. And it's just like, and then when I live my life from that grounding, I make different choices. I live under a lot less pressure. And the circumstances might not be any different, but the place that I'm coming from when I'm not coming out of that place of lack is just so different.
Yeah. And I've seen that. I saw that in myself, and I've seen it in my clients as well. People who come to me and say, well, you know, how am I going to cope with this? How am I going to manage my emotions about this for the rest of my life? And I have one lovely client that said, I don't want to have to do charitable works for the rest of my life to feel like I'm worth something, or that I have some purpose in this life, because I'm not going to have children. And that every time I think about that, I get goosebumps, because I just see so clearly that there is nothing you have to do to be worthy in this life. There's nothing that you have to do to give you value or purpose.
You already are.
You already are it. And when people start to see that's what happened to me. That's when things freed up for me. I was like, okay, cool. I can go and do stuff that I want to do. And, you know, if I end up adding value in the world, which generally we do, don't we?
Well, when we're acting out of a place of lack, we kind of sometimes do, but not as beautifully as when we're coming from a place of knowing that, like in our bones, knowing we're enough. Then we drop all of our thinking about how to manage ourselves and how to change our circumstances and what we need to be okay. When that all falls away, we just, you know, what's left is just love, right? And from that place, you might go and
do charitable work.
Yeah, you may go and do charitable works. You may, you know, whatever you do, you tend to get ideas that are helpful for other people. But it's not that you have to do that as a penance because you're not enough in the first place.
Exactly.
It's totally different game.
Completely.
Now, I know you've written a book, haven't you, about your journey or experience, and you work with your clients around these kind of areas. Can you just share? I haven't had the chance to read it yet, and I might have to get you back on another podcast once I've actually read it. But do you want to but share the name of it? Because just even talking to you, and this is the first time we've met, even talking to you for 45 minutes, and I'm like feeling in a lovely space, just like all nice and settled down from talking to you. So share the name of your book and where people can get hold of it if they want to read more.
Yeah, my book is called Already Complete, Beyond the Myths of Childlessness. And initially it will be available on Amazon and all Amazon related websites. It's going to be published in paperback and electronic version. And I'll be working on the audio following this.
Soon, yeah. And what's your website if people want to reach out and contact you?
My website is vivienneedgecombe.com. It's just my name.
Yeah. And do the bulk of your clients tend to be in this area? Do you work with clients of all different?
I have a mixture. Because I've recently written a book on resilience as well, because it's all so interrelated, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so a variety.
Yeah. Well, I hope people for listening can just I'm sure they will, just get a sense of your calmness and your groundedness and your gentleness. That's just, I'm sure, makes you a wonderful coach for the clients that you have. And it's just the feeling that you come from is that feeling of, like, my guess is in the old days, the people the person you were and the people you're surrounded with were all kind of like frantically feeling lack. And there's the feeling, and the feeling coming from you right now is that feeling of completeness. And I think that's so hopeful to people who, when they're listening to this, recognize, oh my goodness, this is what happened to me. I'm living my whole life with not enough written on my eyeballs. And I had all of the things on the tick box that would look like the perfect life. And I was still walking around with not enough on my eyeballs. That's how little it is to do with circumstance.
Yeah. And that's lovely what you said too, Nicola, because I would love for people listening to this to know that there is hope. That, you know, because it does, I know how hopeless it feels. And I also know that there is hope. So I would love people to take that away from our conversation or from reading my book.
Well, it's the feeling that you're coming from is hopeful, and it has got that sense of completeness to it, which I know people will pick up from listening. So thank you so much for spending time with us today.
It's a great pleasure. Thanks for having me, Nicola.
If you're curious to find out more about what I've been talking about on this episode, the best place to start is to go to alittlepeaceofmind.co.uk, and there you'll find my audio, Freedom from Anxiety, and you can listen to that. Is the best place to start to get some of this understanding into your own bones so it can start making a difference to your life. Until next time, I'll speak to you later.